It's April 8th.
That's my birthday. Oh, that's my birthday.
I'm sorry, 2021. We apologize. We're starting late, probably about 45 minutes late because of technical difficulties. And for the record, we are under COVID protocol. And we also have a sign-up sheet for the public comment, a 1-minute public comment, and that is available to the public, anyone that is here. The first item on the agenda is the retention of counsel. There is litigation probably coming, and we will also need advice in advance of that, quite likely. So at our last meeting, we decided to meet today and to discuss the topic of retention of counsel. Does anybody want to weigh in on that? Any of the commissioners have any thoughts on that issue? Yes, Commissioner Hertzfeld, and also probably for the record, we should state who we are before we start talking.
I'm Tricia Hertzfeld. I'll start it off. I think we had Dean Koch the last time around for this, and I think he did a fine job and is already up to speed on the issues that we have before us. So I think that will save us some money and having to get someone else up to speed on the issue. He's already familiar with it, has done the briefing, and is continuing to represent us in that previous lawsuit that I think is continuing to go on. So my suggestion would be that we retain Dean Koch and Mr. Odebeco to continue their work.
Okay. Any other comment?
A.J. Starling. I concur with Ms. Hertzfeld, Commissioner Hertzfeld, on the retaining of Dean Koch for the reason that he's familiar with Davidson County Election Commission. He's also familiar with this case. It would definitely save time, money, and a lot of things because we are up against a timetable.
Okay.
Commissioner?
Yes. Yes. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah. Commissioner Dan Davis. Although I know that Mr. Koch has done a number of good things, obviously, and is up to speed on the case, it was a little concerning that all the stuff was pre-done at the last meeting. And I think it might be, although it might cost a little money and a hair bit of time, it might be a relevant issue to maybe think about outside counsel. At least that's my opinion after the meeting from the other evening.
Yeah, Ross Evans. I guess one just thought is there any conflict there with Judge Koch? Okay. Is there any conflict there with Judge Koch?
I can speak to that. This is Bob Cooper, Director of Law for Metro Nashville. And let me address both of those points. One, no, there is no conflict. He was hired by the Election Commission to represent the Election Commission in the litigation last fall, which is ongoing. Would have no conflict with regard to the complaint that has been filed regarding this petition. Commissioner Davis, just to address your concern, we retained Judge Koch to prepare a letter in the interest of time, and simply because he had been previously retained by this commission to represent the commission before and had served also last fall in providing an independent opinion. It seemed like that was one way that could expedite matters. It was certainly not intended in any way to communicate, to infringe on this commission's prerogative to choose whatever attorney that the commission wants to choose, but only to help the commission expedite the consideration of this issue.
Commissioner Delana speaking. I believe there is a conflict. I think everybody recognizes that Metro Legal has a conflict in advising us on matters of substance relating to this referendum petition. And we received a letter from Judge Koch on Saturday, this past Saturday, telling us that he was, without consulting with us, that he was going to be working for Metro Legal. I had spoken to Judge Koch because I was trying to keep him apprised of developments with the potential new case, and when he and I spoke, I informed him that, at least in my opinion as one of the commissioners, that I thought that that would be a conflict, and why wouldn't he wait until the commission was constituted to discuss the matter with us. Since then, we've received some advice from Metro Legal and from Judge Koch, and in my opinion, that advice is adversarial. It's not really advising us on what the law is. In my opinion, at least, I think it's an adversarial, both of those opinions are adversarial in nature, and they're taking an adversarial viewpoint. So I have problems, even though I have the greatest respect with both Mr. Cooper and Mr. Koch. I would have problems with proceeding with him, because essentially, even though we should be independent from Metro, Judge Koch made a decision to be retained by Metro without consulting with us. So I too have serious problems with proceeding with Judge Koch, even though I think the world of him.
If I could just address the point on conflict. The intent of hiring Dean Koch to provide an opinion was based upon the same procedure that this commission had adopted in the fall. So there was certainly no intent by Dean Koch, and any concerns about that should be directed toward me. I base that on the process that this commission had approved before, and thought that it would be appropriate again in order to expedite matters. I don't think at this point there is any conflict that has been identified. So I would simply have to disagree with regard to current conflict.
I don't know if we need to take a vote, but I would rather just go on and discuss other candidates. But if there's a vote necessary, I'm happy to do that.
Who are your other candidates?
I have spoken to Jim Blumstein, who I think I think Commissioner Hertzfeld you're familiar with, and I've talked to him about the issues in this case, and he is willing to go forward. I think we spoke to him previously, and I've also spoken to Austin McMullen, who has appeared before us before. So and I've spoken to both of them about the possibility of having a similar arrangement as what we had with Judge Koch and with the Bradley Arant firm. And as I understand it, they have determined that there would be no conflict with the representation in the old case and the representation in the case that's already been filed and potential new cases. So I think it's a possibility that we could go forward with them. I've spoken to Mr. Blumstein about possibly doing something on a flat rate, and to be assisted by the Bradley Arant firm.
Okay, I have a couple questions, if we can just kind of.
Sure.
I'm glad we're open for discussion.
Yeah.
Which firm is Mr. McMullen with?
He's with the Bradley Arant firm also.
He is also with Bradley.
Yes,
And
yes.
and Mr. Odebeku is with
Exactly.
the Bradley firm. And so if we think that Justice Koch has a conflict, it's not your position that that conflict extends to the Bradley Arant firm, or would you consider them to be walled off?
I wouldn't consider them to be walled off. So far as I know, they did not take part, and they were not engaged by Metro. In other words, I would not take the position that they've been infected. I don't think it's that kind of a situation. And as I understand it, they don't believe there's a conflict.
Okay, so I guess my thought is, I think this is an interesting way to maybe address both of the concerns. I mean, obviously, I know Professor Blumstein, and I think I spoke very highly of him before. I think he's an excellent choice. If the commission is clearly going to vote against Dean Koch, which is my preferred candidate. But I think and also Mr. McMullen, I'm very familiar with his work as well, so I have no quarrel with the qualifications of the candidates. But I do think it might make some sense, if we're going to go that way, to also have Mr. Odebeku, to the extent that he's already worked on the one case and is working on the one, to continue working on the other, and that might save some of that time in kind of catching up and getting familiar and having pleadings ready and that type of thing. So if we could say the Bradley Arant firm, not to the exclusion of Mr. Odebeku, but he could also, assist to the extent that Mr. McMullen needs it. It feels like that might be a good compromise that could potentially save us money if it's not on a flat fee, but also let us get up to speed as quickly as we can and address your concern about the perceived conflict that you think that Dean Koch has.
Okay. From my discussions with Mr. McMullen, I don't think he has any thought to exclude Mr. Odebeku from the case. I think he recognizes that he has, very relevant experience, as does Mr. Murphy, who's a former Metro legal counsel, but that Mr. McMullen would be the lead person with his law firm. And that would be, I think that the thought would be that Mr. McMullen would be lead counsel with his firm, and he would basically be responsible for the resources that his firm puts on the case. Certainly not to the exclusion of Mr. Odebeku, because I think we all recognize he's got some expertise for certain, and some background about the first case.
And it might save us some time and money. So, yeah, I mean, if that's the arrangement and we're not excluding Mr. Odebeku and perhaps encouraging Mr. McMullen to use that to keep things a bit more efficient and cost-saving and, time-wise, then I could go along with that certainly and feel very comfortable.
Okay.
So to be clear, I don't think Justice Koch has a conflict, but regardless, I'm happy to move along on that issue.
All right. Mr. Starling, do you have any questions?
And I know Jim Blumstein as well. Is he considered at all into this scenario? And I'm not sure which law firm he's with. He's got his own.
He's with, Mr. Blumstein is with Vanderbilt University, and this is one of his areas of expertise. He is a pretty well-recognized authority in this type of a matter. So now I've got to say, we don't have an agreement with either one of these two lawyers yet, but they have expressed an interest. And I have materials I can pass out about Professor Blumstein and about Mr. McMullen.
Yeah, and that's fine, and we can definitely look at it. And of course, I'm sort of out of my arena, and I'm kind of relying on the two attorneys here on the commission to make those recommendations, because I have never retained neither one of them. I do know Jim Blumstein from other arenas, but I'm just kind of relying on you guys to kind of share y'all's experience. Okay.
Chairman Delanis, do you think that we would have a firm proposal by our next meeting?
Yes, I would hope so, yes. And now, let me add this information. I spoke to Professor Blumstein about advising us in connection with the issue about the number of signatures, since that's the first issue that is in front of us. And he said that he would be willing to basically review the materials that have been supplied thus far on that point and consider them. In other words, he wouldn't conduct like an all-world research effort on his own, but review the materials. And I do believe we've got a limited number of materials on that issue. And prepare a written opinion and appear before this commission for a meeting to discuss his written opinion. And he thought he could do that within a week from today. He would charge, I believe, in the range of $15,000 to do that. Now, the issue we may, and we're probably going to discuss this issue, we may not need that advice at this point if the commission is willing to act on that. But I say that to give you all kind of an idea of the way he wants to work on the case.
I mean, I think that sounds like a lot of really good information. You know, I wasn't concerned about conflicts and making decisions prior to today's meeting, but, you know, if you really feel, and it's clear that, you know, my colleagues here on the right do feel that there is a conflict in the advice that, you know, we've at least been provided at some level, perhaps it does, you know, make some sense to get an independent opinion on the number of signatures. I mean, I already felt like I had a pretty good handle on that today, but I will leave that to the wisdom of the other commissioners here. But I mean, perhaps if we're starting with kind of a new lead of a legal team, then we should have advice as to, you know, what we do for that next step. It's difficult to be a lawyer and a client, and so I'm trying to behave like a client and not the lawyer.
Personally, this is Jim Delanis. Personally, Commissioner Hertzfeld, I feel ready. I'm sorry. Personally, Commissioner Hertzfeld, I feel pretty ready to resolve that issue, but I would perhaps want to defer to the commissioners who are new, and perhaps at some point after we engage in more of a discussion about this, they can let us know whether they feel comfortable with voting on this or whether they want to get further advice on that point. Commissioner Starling, do you have any views on that?
Well, I think that we definitely need to get the input from the newer members because, you know, they're trying to catch up to speed where we are on some of this stuff, and I would like to hear the opinions of both the commissioners.
Commissioner Evans, we haven't really discussed this in detail. Would you want to hear, and Commissioner Davis, do you want to hear kind of the back and forth and the feelings of the other commissioners, and at that point then make a decision about whether you think we need to engage a lawyer to advise us on that issue further, or let us know whether you're willing to or you believe you know enough to make a decision? I'm just raising that as an issue.
This is Dan Davis. I think it would be wise to do so for a matter that's important enough for the citizens of Davidson County. And as well as, going forward, if there's going to be potential litigation anyway, be the last thing to do would be, charging in with not enough information. And I think we have just enough time to still make it happen.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along the same lines as well as Commissioner Evans.
Okay, all right.
And if I may, I think it's actually a very good point that Commissioner Davis has raised, because we do have pending litigation on the signature issue, so that is,
Right.
particularly sticky, and that's an excellent point. I appreciate you raising it. So, yeah, that certainly tips me over to the edge that I think I'd prefer to
All
get
right.
that advice.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a consensus to proceed to engage Professor Blumstein to do as I've described, and then to report back to this commission at our next meeting, which may be very soon.
So to rephrase you, if it's okay, just
Absolutely.
to make sure that I understand
Yes,
and we're super
absolutely.
clear. So at this point, we would be retaining Professor Blumstein for a flat rate to give us advice on the number of signature issues. We will then, you'll get a proposal from him for future litigation and opinions moving forward. We can hopefully discuss that at our next meeting and determine if we'd like to move forward with him as our lawyer for the rest of this issue,
Okay.
with keeping Justice Koch as the lawyer for the case that's currently pending, where he's already the lawyer. We're not replacing anyone.
I don't think that's before the commission.
Okay, but that's not part of what we're
That's not
talking about today.
That's not part of what I'm suggesting at all.
Perfect, great.
And the only other, this is Jim Delanis. The only other question would be that if Professor Blumstein is going to go and represent us beyond this numerosity issue and to engage in the litigation, he's going to have backup. So I would ask that I be allowed to discuss that with him and at least suggest Mr. McMullen to him to see whether that would be workable for him.
Absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Starling?
Just for clarification, so we're going to, I assume, retain Mr. Blumstein for an opinion.
Right.
And then after we get that opinion, then we will come back and vote for legal counsel beyond that.
Yes, and I think the suggestion was that we ask him to make a proposal about on how he would represent us in the future.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Is any further discussion on that point? No. Okay. Is that a motion?
I don't know that I even know how to make the motion, but I will make a motion to permit Chairman Derlanis to engage Professor Blumstein for an opinion on the number of votes and signatures issue only, with the express understanding that he'll also be getting a proposal for future litigation in this issue. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on number of signatures required on petition. It sounds to me, although I, will be corrected, that we've also discussed that second issue, and it's time to go on to item number 3.
Yeah, do we need to have a motion to move that to the next agenda? I think we do.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to move number 2, the discussion and possible vote of number of signatures required on the petition, to the agenda for our next meeting.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? The motion carries unanimously.
I'll also make a motion to move item number 3 from the agenda, discussion and possible vote on placing referendum before voters, to the next scheduled agenda for this commission.
I just wonder whether, this is Jim Delanis, I just wonder whether, while I agree a vote would not be in order, I just wonder whether some discussion would be in order for the newer members, for them to kind of get a handle on some of the legal issues. I do think that we've thrown a lot of paper at them, and I think perhaps some discussion would be in order to give them some more background information.
So my concern about getting into too much of a discussion is that I think now at this point we need legal counsel to explain to us exactly, what's going on and what their position is moving forward. So I'm happy to have a very fulsome discussion of it, but I think I'd like to have someone here who could answer those questions and explain things in a way that is consistent with the counsel that we're receiving. So I'd like to put it off until we have that counsel if we can.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. All right. Okay. So you've made a motion, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay.
AJ
Okay.
Starling.
Yes, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? With no opposition, the motion carries. All right. The next item on the agenda is the AOE report. I'm not sure, there's a whole lot new to report, but if there's any update, Mr. Roberts, please give it to us, any update since our last meeting.
I'll be pretty brief. We have completed reviewing the signatures that were submitted for good government, and we are prepared to send the signatures to the clerk once the commission gives us direction as to which election they would be determined by. So either the November election or the August election. And there's still the question that Mr. Roberts brought up in his lawsuit concerning that August election. Is it based on the entire vote in August or just the property assessor's race? We have, in preparation for an election in late June, early July, we have notified as of today 3,300 poll officials to gauge their interest in assisting with that election, and have already started receiving input back from poll officials. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for AOE Roberts?
This is Ross Evans. I just want to clarify, did you say you have reviewed all of them at this point now and certified those?
Yes, sir, we have.
That are appropriate? Okay.
Mr. Davis, any questions?
No, Chairman.
Ms. Hertzfeld?
No, thank you.
Mr. Starling?
No.
Okay. And this is Jim Delanis, so the number is 12,398?
That's correct.
All right, okay.
Could you repeat that number again? This glass.
The number's 12,398 that we have certified.
Thank you.
All right, anything further before we go to public comment? All right, we have two people who've signed up. All right, we have one person who's still here, and that's Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, do you want to make a public comment?
I'll just say, honored commissioners, you gave me more than a minute last Tuesday.
Right.
I'll take less than a minute tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, and now we are at the time to set the time and date of the next meeting. Go ahead.
I'm not exactly sure how quickly we think he can get up to speed on that issue. I do have a tad bit of an issue next week in that I am traveling Monday afternoon out of town. So I'll have basically a 28-hour period that I won't be available, but otherwise I can make myself available. So we could either do super early Monday morning if we feel that it's that urgent and he can be prepared, or I can do it anytime. I would say probably Tuesday after about 4 o'clock. I'm also totally open, knowing that this is a crunch time, and we'll probably also want to have Professor Blumstein here. If we wanted to do it at the call of the chair, that you could have the administrator email us for dates and times that also work for Mr. Blumstein and get that notice out to the public as soon as possible. That might give everybody just a tad bit of space to look at their calendars, and for Professor Blumstein too as well.
The call of the chair is probably a good idea unless for some reason we need a meeting Monday morning, and we may not need a meeting Monday morning. General Cooper, when will we need to set, if we're to have a meeting on Monday morning at the call of the chair, when will we have to notice that meeting?
No later than Friday.
Friday into business? Okay, all right.
Is it working?
I guess that's a mistake.
Yes, before
Okay.
end of business on Friday.
All right. Any questions from anybody? Essentially, what we've talked about is authorizing the chair to call the next meeting, and that doesn't mean I'm just going to do it arbitrarily. You all would be contacted, and we would work with your schedules. And according to Ms. Ecke, our lawyer, in order for us to set a meeting Monday morning, if we decide to do it Monday morning, we would have to put it out on public notice by the close of business Friday, which is tomorrow.
That's fine.
Okay, all right. Okay. It appearing that there's no public comment, and as I understand it, no further business, are we to item 7?
Yes, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Call the question. Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, with no opposition, the motion carries.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.